with our special guest, Erik DeB, who has been burning it up. Hey, hi. Who has been burning it up, writing fiction for Dungeons and Dragons and some of his own original stuff, and including some, experimental things coming up. So why don't we touch it off with him saying hello and giving us some background on how he got into the business.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. I've been writing for 11 years now. My first novel came out at the end of 2005. It's a Forgotten Realms novel. I got into the business in a very unusual way. Most writers, they will have some interesting story because no writer ever gets into writing the same way twice. It's like lightning that way, except lightning is more likely to hit you and do the same amount of damage the second time than a writer is to break in the same way someone else has done. So I'll tell you briefly how I broke in. So there was an open call, if anybody recalls, for a novel called Maiden of Pain. That is a priestess or priest or some worshiper of Loviatar who was going to be the first novel in the Priests series. Now, they sent out this open call to anybody who wanted to submit for this novel. And I think they got something like 1,000 entries, and mine was one of those entries. And I wrote this novel that was very action-y and very combat-like and didn't really get sufficiently into the philosophies, I guess, or whatever. I wrote a fighter novel, right? That's what I wrote, not a priest novel. And so I didn't win, obviously. Cameron Franklin won that, and his novel, Maiden of Pain, came out in 2004, 2005, something like that. But my submission was good enough that Wizards was like, all right, so we wanted to collect a group of people that we think might work for us. So we're going to send you another thing, which is going to be a limited call. And that's only going to go out to like 20 people. And so I got 6 months later, they sent me a letter and said, hey, so this group of 20 people, including you, are going to submit pitches for one of these two novels, either a fighter novel using one of these prestige classes. We're talking 3rd edition prestige classes. So things like Purple Dragon Knight and now I can't even remember. There's the Master of Chains one, which Jess LeBeau wrote, and there was Blade Singer, which came out in So Ghostwalker was on that list. Everyone who submitted a fighter novel basically did a Ghostwalker novel because it's the best prestige class on that list. And I was caught between doing a Ghostwalker novel or a Purple Dragon Knight novel. And I said, well, like hell, am I going to have my first novel ever published called Purple Dragon? That's just not going to happen. So I went with the Ghostwalker thing, and I won. That pitch went really well. The guy who wrote the Wizards novel, as in it was supposed to be based on a particular spell, like a signature spell. If you look at the Wizards series, they have a novel called Dark Sight, or Dark Vision, which is by Bruce Cordell, a good friend of mine, and apparently he really likes that spell. But it's a good book. The one from our group that won the pitch for that novel also did a Ghostwalker submission. They liked his so much that they said, hey, can you rewrite this to be about the villain who happens to be a blood magus? If you remember from Complete Arcane back in 3rd edition, there was the blood wizard who would like go into people and then come out of other people when they were wounded and stuff. Anyway, it was fantastic. And the dude said yes. So James Davis wrote that novel called Bloodwalk, and it's largely about the villain who is a blood wizard. It's pretty awesome. But so Ghostwalkers were amazing, and everyone wanted to write about them. So that's how my novel came about. And that story, very unusual. It happens to very, very few people. Most writers, they just kind of chip away and keep writing, keep publishing, and eventually find a break somewhere. So every story is unique, and you just got to keep working at it. That's what I have found by talking with other writers too. So that's how that happened. And then from there, I just continued writing for Wizards until Wizards kind of backed off of its fiction quite as much as it used to be. And now I write my own stuff and with other people, which I'll talk about more.
Great. Well, I also saw that you did some game books as well, not just the fiction books.
Oh, yes. Those all came about, and this is an interesting way that this happens too. Those came about mostly because James Wyatt and I were stuck on a layover on the way back from Gen Con, sitting next to each other. And he said, "So you've been writing some fiction for us?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to write this one particular game thing that I'm doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So that's how that happened. And that got me started writing. I did The Plane Above. That was my first source book from 4th edition that I contributed to. And I wrote a third of Gloomrot, which is the whole box set about the Shadowfell. And then I wrote a good chunk of the Neverwinter campaign setting, which came out toward the end of 4th edition. And I did some articles here and there, but those are my main hard publishing credits. They were
And
really
in addition
fun.
to that, you've been a role player for a long time, right?
Oh yes, since 5th grade, I decided that recess was boring, and I'd rather stay inside and play D&D with my friends, who I chain ganged into coming to play, and it was really fun. Yeah, some of my first characters were based, just shamelessly stolen from concepts and examples in the rule books, and turned into fun characters that still appear in ways in my fiction to this day. Yeah, I've been a geek forever. It's been part of my creative vision. So, yep.
So what things have you brought over from your role-playing days into your fiction?
So one of my novel projects in the Forgotten Realms was Down Shadow. Let me see if I have. This is my bookcase right behind me.
And it is a sweet-looking bookcase.
This book right here is the first book about Kaelin Dren, Shadowbane Inquisitor. If anyone remembers Complete Adventurer, I think it was, about rogues and stuff from 3rd edition. They were kind of a paladin rogue hybrid, a paladin who utilizes some of the rogue abilities to fight evil. And that character was originally an NPC that I ran briefly in my home campaign. And if you've ever read these books, you know that Kaelin does not have a particularly happy life. Bad things happen to him. His friends die, things like that. It was much more tragic in my campaign. I didn't bring all of that over, even though I have a reputation of being hard on my characters. So that would be an example. And one of the main characters of another series that I'm working on, excuse me for a moment.
That is a nice bookcase.
Thank you. This book, Shadow of the Winter King. This is book 1 of the World of Ruin series. One of the characters from that is based on a PC that I ran once, who was, let me see, yeah, that was 3.5, and it was actually an Eberron campaign. My character's whole concept, my character was a war mage who derived powers, and if you recall, war mages were very limited wizards that were basically blasters. Like, all of their stuff was offensive magic. And they would occasionally learn other spells, like utility spells that might help them, like shield or flight, for instance, if you wanted to strafe a dude. So my War Mage's concept in that game was that every time I gained a level and learned a new spell, it represented adding a piece to my armor. So my character had either leather armor or studded leather armor, and it was just like, so you remember that scene in Pulp Fiction when they meet up with the gimp in the basement, the guy in the black leather suit who was just really creepy? That was my character. I looked kind of like that. I had this whole suit of black leather armor and like gauntlets and like spikes, and I would project spells from my helmet as well. It was pretty cool. So that character ended up being one of the antagonists in this series, who I am I'm now writing the third book, which is called Mask of the Blood Queen, which is mostly about that character. And that character's name is Mask. Not like the Forgotten Realms deity, but like the whole concept of wearing the armor.
So what are the challenges or differences for you between writing your own original stuff and writing, stuff for a franchise?
I find the distinction largely illusory. I mean, if you're writing a shared world IP thing, like the Forgotten Realms or Eberron or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Star Wars or whatever you're working on, you do a lot of research because there have been a lot of people doing a lot of work in that setting before you, and you make up a lot of stuff. Your characters, you make up the story, you make up the characters, you make up, where they come from. You might have ideas about places and backgrounds based on other people's work, but that's that level of the research. So really, you're still creating an entirely new story by yourself. Just you have a few helping hands and a few things to connect to. When you're writing an entirely creator-owned universe, you have the magic make something up button. If you get yourself in a trap, or you need a character to come from somewhere, or you need your characters to explore somewhere, you could just make it up. I find that that's sometimes more difficult, sometimes more fun. But the process of writing in a shared world versus writing in a creator-owned world is really no different. You're still telling the same, you're practicing the same activity, telling a story, creating characters, building emotional investment in those characters. And so, yeah, the only real difference is that a shared world setting has a fan base built in that probably doesn't follow you into your own creator-owned universe. I kind of hope that they do, and sometimes they do. Some people really like your stuff, and they're like, "Oh, all right, I'll see what else you do." If you look at the distinction between the many people who read Drizzt Do'Urden novels in the Forgotten Realms, and then the fewer people who read the Demon Wars books, which are in many ways superior to the Drizzt stuff. Maybe that's controversial of me to say. I don't know. This is my taste. The fan bases are different. The audiences are different. So in shared worlds have a particular fan base built in, and they also tend to get a lot of disrespect from critics who dismiss things as derivative and non-original, things like that. But it's just not really true. It takes as much creative energy to work in a shared world as it does in a creator-owned world.
Well, on that note,
in my experience,
a couple of industrial things that have changed. Isn't there like a group now that's kind of like a writers group just for people who do franchise fiction?
So
or there was.
There have been a few things to that effect. Amazon tried a thing called Amazon Worlds. Which I have not, Kindle Worlds, right? Which I have not participated in myself, but they opened it up to basically come and publish your fan fiction, and maybe get some money from it, which is cool. I mean, I support that. I've written fan fiction before. None of it will ever see the light of day. Do not panic. Back when I was a teenager, I started out by writing a fan fiction about video games. Okay, it was a Final Fantasy VII fanfic. I'm sure many of you have written one of those. So, yeah,
Nowadays,
it happened. No one will ever read it. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Like fan fiction is now part of the one of the steps you take.
Exactly. I mean, and it was for me back when I was a teenager. I have never looked down on fan fiction. I mean, I encourage people to do fan fiction. It's a great way to, practice your skills and develop your ability to tell a story. In some respects, my work in the Forgotten Realms is basically fan fiction. It's just, fan fiction that I have an official license to do. So I mean, the line is very blurry, and that's really a good thing. Now the thing is, I don't often encourage people to try and sell stuff that they've written in an existing property. A friend of mine came to me a few months ago, and he mentions this to me every so often to this day, that he wrote the Star Wars novel, and he really wants me to read it and give him some feedback. And I just, well, A, I don't have enough time to do something like that, and B, it's kind of iffy because I would like to write a Star Wars novel, and I don't want to really mess around too much with potential legal issues. But the thing is, he says, "Oh, how do I get this published? How do I get this published?" And I say, "Well, you can talk to the people at Disney/LucasArts and see if they're looking for fiction, because they are. They seem to have their own plan. They're putting out some pretty good stuff. Or you could file the serial numbers off and make it not a Star Wars story and just set it in your own universe. That would be cool too. Lots of people do that from all kinds of settings. Or you could write something entirely original. And what I come down on is the suggestion of writing something entirely original, because once you get through that, having the settings that you really admire and they've taught you how to tell a story, then you should really try and branch out and tell your own thing in your own setting. I mean, because it's really fun. This is my first book that I published in my own setting with my own stories and my own characters and all of that, totally out of my own head, and it was fantastic. I'm currently writing book 3, and there's going to be 4 books. The first 2 have come out. The second one, grab that off my shelf. This is the second one. It's called Shield of the Summer Prince. Yep. And that's been really fun.
Awesome. So for you, it seems like you're part of this new generation of writers where the walls between writing for games and writing for novels and other types of industries has really started to kind of crumble down.
A little bit. It's certainly becoming more flexible. I mean, everyone has written a little bit of tie-in stuff. Everyone has written some original stuff, and there's that prejudice that I talked about earlier about critics looking down on tie-in fiction has started to unravel, because there's been some really, really, really good high-level mainstream tie-in fiction that's come out recently. Star Wars has exploded back in a really big way. The Force Awakens was amazingly popular and successful. And so books and comic books that have come out from that have been pretty successful too. I don't know if the Forgotten Realms will spring back and start publishing to the same extent that they did before. They have a few novels that they're coming out with every year. I think it's like down to 3 or 4 a year. But I mean, they're really focusing on quality, so we'll see how that goes. I suspect, don't quote me on this, internet, everyone who's seeing this, I'm saying this totally off the record, nobody knows. I suspect that Wizards is focusing on prep for their movie. So we'll see how that goes. I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be fun.
I'm not holding my breath just yet.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I tend to be an optimist. That's my thing. I mean, my spirits were not crushed by the original D&D movie. I was like, oh, this is terrible. But it doesn't mean they can't do it right eventually. So I guess we'll see. But I really hope, because they seem to be doing a Forgotten Realms movie, like that seems logical. I really hope that they really embrace it and get smart, good people who know about the setting, who can make it really resonate with both fans of the setting and with a mainstream audience. Because I know that's possible.
We just saw it with The Force Awakens, right?
That's right, exactly. And I've written several novels that might make really good movies. Just saying, just saying. If anybody wants to contact me, they have my number.
So it seems like you do a lot of fantasy. Is there any other genres that you're thinking of cracking into?
Well, all of my stuff is kind of blended. I was showing you, let's see. So the Shadowbane books are kind of fantasy superhero sorts of books, which is pretty cool. Like my characters are larger than life and they have kind of inherited superpowers. My World of Ruin books are these post-apocalyptic fantasy novels. I describe it as kind of Game of Thrones meets Fallout. It's like it's set in a world thousands of years after a magical apocalypse has wiped out most of civilization, and people are emerging from their like mountain caverns where they hid to keep themselves from dying in the magical onslaught, that sort of thing. My first Forgotten Realms novel. Do I have? I do. Hold on. There we go. Ghostwalker, right here. This is a fantasy western. So let me explain. Sorry, my chair is not cooperating with me very well today. Let me explain. So I mean fantasy western as in if you take High Plains Drifter and you get Clint Eastwood and you give him a sword instead of a gun, you get my main character and the basics of the plot. So I have always been interested in splitting genres and experimenting and doing different things. I wrote a novel recently called Blind Justice, which is in the Helmau setting from the Ed Greenwood group, which I'll tell you about in a second, which is an urban fantasy novel. It takes place in our world, in our time, so 2015, 2016, and it has a little bit of fantasy elements, but it's largely a police procedural kind of thriller novel. Let's see. Hold on. I have the audiobook version to show people. This is what it looks like. There's a little glare. Sorry about that. Yeah. And that book is about social issues of the day. The main antagonistic force in this novel is toxic masculinity, which if you look at my Facebook, you'll see I talk about frequently. And that's, men feeling entitled to take out their aggressions and power and whatnot on less powerful people. There's a lot to be said about it, but that's basically what the novel is about. It's about a person hunting down and punishing people who take things too far and feel entitled to do so. So the Ed Greenwood group, which I alluded to earlier, and I said the magic name Ed Greenwood, which I hope that many people listening to this will recognize. Ed has finally said, well, I've amassed a huge amount of contacts in my time writing for the Realms and for everyone else. And, man, as I do this, I'm going to have to wax into my Ed Greenwood accent. So bear with me if I get this really deep Canadian accent. And now I've decided to go out on my own and create a series of a series of settings in which lots of people, my friends, will write books, and it'll be great. And so that's what happened. The Ed Greenwood group is a fiction collective of many writers, many artists, many creatives of all different sorts, who are working to build fiction in a number of settings: fantasy, urban fantasy, space opera, horror, all of those things. It started off fairly conservative and fairly reasonable. It was 50 novels planned to be released over the next 10 years. Ed writing about 5 or 6 of them. Now, there are about 500 creatives attached to this group. Oh yeah. There are 15 different settings. Helmau is the first one to have launched. The second one I think is going to be what we call Pony Island Adventures. It's our little secret code name. It's not actually what it's going to be called. Don't worry. Don't worry. And then there's going to be a space opera setting called Lost Princesses of Mars, which I'm writing a novel in that setting as well. And basically, it's like a novel a month forever, I think is the publishing plan. And it is fantastic. It could be more than one novel a month. But yeah, Ed's brought together some very high-powered people. The first Helma books were Ed. He writes the first one in every setting. And then Chris Jackson, who writes a lot of Pathfinder Paizo fiction. So several of his novels are available. And he's really good. He lives on a boat out in near Florida and floats around the Caribbean from time to time. He's pretty awesome. And then several other people. My good friend Gabrielle Harboui, if anyone knows her, she edited the World of Ruin novels, and she is writing a Helma novel soon called Of the Essence, which is about a magical tattoo artist demon. It's awesome. Oh, I haven't told you what Helma is, really. Helma is modern urban fantasy, and the premise conceit in this world is that there is another world of creatures that we call demons. That is Daemon, not hellfire demons, not like religious demons, but demons that come to our world as exiles. They're basically murder is strictly the worst possible crime that anyone could commit on that world. So they don't kill people who do terrible things. They exile them to our world. So our world is basically Australia for this other world. Okay, all the convicts, all the criminals, all the scum, all the insane demons come here, and then they're among humans. And the demons really consider humans to be basically cattle. Like, we are a lower life form that is barely sentient and not really that important. So they do what they want. They can eat our essence to sustain themselves, but it's not very filling, right? It's like eating unflavored popcorn. What's more filling to them is eating the essence of other demons. And so for a long time, for centuries, millennia, there have been demons walking among us. Just in small numbers, not very many, just, the crazies that have been exiled from the other world. But recently, there has been an influx of demons due to political strife going on in the other world. And these are not necessarily convicts and criminals that are getting exiled to our world, but political adversaries of the powers that be. So more demons among the humans means more strife and more likelihood that the demons will be dragged out of the shadows. So that is your little teaser for what's going on in the Helma universe. It's pretty cool. My demon in Blind Justice.
So there are good demons and bad demons.
Well, they have their own moral scale. It functions differently. There are some that are more dangerous than others. There are some that want to help or at least not kill humans. And there are some that are just murdering, rampaging psychopaths. My demon hunts down and kills demons who have enemies in the other world. So murder isn't legal on their world, right? But once the demons are sent to our world, then they're fair game. So if your political enemy or someone you really hated was exiled to our world, you could send my character to go and take care of that demon. And then their essence, I think, flows back to the other world in some way, and they become enslaved to the person who got rid of them. So it's all very complicated. She's just a cog in that wheel. And she's very effective. So
she's a very effective cog in that machine, then.
Yes. And she has spent the last centuries slaying only demons, and now she has moved to targeting humans, and the whole reason for that is in the book. So,
all right, we'll have to check it out.
Yeah, well, it's fun. I really liked writing it, and listening to the audiobook, I kept saying to myself, "Oh, geez, did I really write that? Because that is really disturbing." Not a book for kids. If you listeners are under, I don't know, 18 or so, you should probably have a responsible adult check this book out before you read it, because it is really deep and dark and can be very upsetting. Lots of adult content. I don't mean sexual adult content. I mean like people being really, really evil to each other in a very modern way that people are in our world. So, yeah.
So
Reader
little
beware.
mature label there. So
Yes.
but you're involved in some other projects as well that's coming up.
The list seems interminable sometimes. Yeah. So I have 3 novels to write this year, one of which I am almost finished with. That's the Third World Ruin book, and then I have 2 more for Ed, and then I am also doing some fiction for Lewis Porter and his Neo Exodus setting. If anyone hasn't checked this out or doesn't know what it is, Neo Exodus is this. Man, how to best describe it? It's high fantasy, but in a sort of really awesome way. Like the best sort of fantasy cartoon stuff that's going on in this world of political intrigue and high magic and high technology, and it's fun. Lewis has recently started to put out fiction to go along with this setting, and I have written 2 stories for him at this point, and I have plans to write a third. They're all serialized web fiction primarily. The first one, which was called Grit for Hire, about Freya. She's a gunslinger, okay, and she basically goes and is hired onto this job that goes sideways really fast, and she has to shoot and think her way out of it, and it's pretty cool. And then the second one, I don't know if Lewis has leaked the details of it yet. It's about Orsia Wentworth, who is a swashbuckler iconic. Yes, it's going to be great. The one about Freya was 4 pieces, so those released like one a week over a course of about a month. And he is compiling them together to be in an ebook. And I think he's going to release the ebooks individually and then maybe a collection. I'm not sure. His plans aren't fully realized yet. And then the one about Orsia was, I think, 5 or 6 parts. It was longer than the first one. So yeah, so that's going really well. His setting is really cool. I like working in it, and it uses the a Pathfinder compatible 3.5 engine. So if you like that mechanical system, check it out. It's really fun. I mean, check it out anyway, because the flavor can be applied to any kind of game that you're running pretty easily. His book is mostly flavor with a little bit of mechanical stuff. It's very good.
Well, Lewis is an
Highly
old friend of mine. Also, he's been a previous guest of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I knew you knew who he was. I'm speaking to all of you watching this.
Yeah, so I'm guilty of hanging a.
If I point at people, is that too aggressive? I don't want to freak anybody out here.
So we've talked about Neo Exodus. We talked about Greenwood and your upcoming projects. Is there anything experimental you're getting into? Because I know a lot of people, we've touched base with people that are doing serialized fiction and Patreon and all that sort of stuff.
Well, you may have noticed that I'm wearing an N7 hoodie.
Yeah.
That might be relevant.
Is that a hint?
Well, okay. So I'll just tell you. So I created a Mass Effect tabletop role-playing game.
Ah.
Not to sell, not to distribute. That's not going to happen. Don't worry. It's only for me to play and to share with my friends because, I'm a big fan and I'm a geek and that's what I do. And, if BioWare was ever interested, they know how to contact me. But it's been fun, just kind of like breaking open a setting and trying to apply my own mechanical system to it. It's not like any other game that I've ever played, so it's not D&D like, it's not Iron Kingdoms like. It's a kind of run and gun sort of system with a lot of like extra powers and stuff that you use that do similar things. So that's been really fun. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. Probably won't. But if you find me at a convention, I run play tests and stuff for people there, and it's been really fun. A friend of mine and I are looking into creating a video game. So that could be fun. I've always wanted to work on one of those, and I haven't as yet. A lot of the stuff I did for Neverwinter ended up in the Neverwinter game. So I think a lot of our creative work went into building their setting, obviously, because we wanted it to be mirrored across multiple platforms. But I never worked directly on a video game, and I think that would be really fun. I am very much into CRPG sorts of games, mostly BioWare stuff, Mass Effect, Dragon Age. I'm currently playing Persona 4, which is really fun, actually. I mean, it's a dating sim meets RPG, and it's interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever played it, but you might check it out. It's Persona 4 is what it's called.
The Persona series has always kind of been on my list. I just haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I don't think the games are majorly connected to each other, so you can just kind of start wherever you want. And Persona 5 is supposed to be coming out later this year, I think, on next-gen platforms. So we'll see. 4 was a PS2 game, that era of video games, and they've recently re-released a golden version, which I think is on either PS3, Xbox 360, or an next gen. I'm not sure. I'm playing the PS2 version because I'm old school like that, I guess.
Oh, in fact, I just brushed the dust off my PS2 just about a week ago. I was like, I still have this?
I have a backwards compatible PS3, so
Nice.
One of those very early versions of the PS3. I sold my PS2, and when I say sold, I mean I gave it away for like $20 to a single mom from France because her son needed a thing to do when she wasn't there because she was working. Yeah, long story, but basically, my wife works with a lot of people from various countries, and she's very into the whole into giving people things. She works as an animal rescue right now, as a development director, and so what she does is she builds relationships with people to have them give money to rescue cats, and it's pretty cool. So through her, I've been able to involve myself in a great deal of charitable sorts of activities, and that's really rewarding for me.
Very cool. Very cool. So we're probably going to wrap up here shortly. Is there anything you want to highlight, pitch before we wrap up?
Check out my stuff. ericsgotttobe.com. I'm sure there will be links that are attached to this. I'm still writing stuff. I plan to come out with at least one novel this year. I don't think the others are on the publishing schedule for this year, but there should be one or two next year, and I keep writing stuff all the time. If you like my stuff, there's a lot of it. And I have free stuff on my website too, like companion stories that go along with the novels. Those are always fun. And otherwise, for all of you young and not so young people who would like to break into writing, who might be watching this, keep pushing at it, man. That's it. It just takes a lot of effort, and it takes time, but it's worth it. It's really fun, and you will eventually make money. Although that should not be your primary motivation, because writing is not super lucrative. Keep your day job until you sell a lot and sell really well.
And then start thinking about it.
Yeah. So that would be my inspirational and pragmatic, practical sort of advice. So yeah, keep going. It's worth it.
Well, hey, thanks for your time today, Erik. And thanks
No
for our
problem.
listeners at the Nerdstravaganza podcast. And check out our YouTube Ganza Gaming series. So everybody, have a great day. Take care.
Take care. Thanks for having me.